You know, that movie has overshadowed my whole career, Blood In, Blood Out, Sangre por Sangre. I think to me it's way more than just a movie to me. For me, it was a cultural roller coaster ride because, you know, when I auditioned, I went into a place on Hollywood and Vine, and I was going in for another movie called The Bridge. And I was sitting there reading the lines. I had never done a movie before, only theater in New York, and like I said, a stand-in thing with Madonna, and only theater. I was a theater actor. So I was trying to break into movies. So I'm reading for The Bridge, and I'm trying to get the lines down, and a guy named Rick Pagano, who's a casting agent for Blood In, Blood Out, he comes up to me, he says, "Are you here from Miklo?" I said, "What's a Miklo?" And he hands me the sides, and it said, "Blue-Eyed Chicano." And I immediately said, how can this be happening to me? This is who I am, you know. My whole life trying to fit in to the Mexican side of my family and being embraced actually more than the other side of the family, which is why I was, you know, it was very dear to me. It was very emotional for me because all my tias and tios, when I was young, you know, I had a kind of a tough childhood. And, you know, my mother had alcoholic problems, and she would go away for long periods of time. And my tias would bring me in, and they would be so warm with me, and they would cook in the morning for me migas. I don't know if you know what migas.
Yeah. Right.
And I learned how to cook migas from my tias, and I learned more about our, you know, the Chicano experience. And for me, you know, I was still trying to fit in though, because I was, you know, my grandmother would take me to Robstown, Texas. I don't know if you know about Robstown, Texas, the cotton pickers. That's the high school, you know, the slang is cotton pickers. But so she would take me to this little city, Robstown. Yeah. And I didn't have the Chicano experience or the Mexican-American experience because I was brought up in Ohio and then later New York. So, you know, for me, it was all new to me. And I'd go in and she would take me by the hand with her little warm Indian hand, and she would take me into these little pan de dulces. And I'd go in, I'd see all this colored bread. And you'd smell the bread, you know, like you walk in. And those memories, they all came back to me when I did Blood In, Blood Out, because I go to Cinco Puntos and all the pan de dulces. And, you know, I would remember my Chicano experience as a little güerito. My grandma called me her little güerito. And, you know, it was a big part of the foundation of Miklo because I experienced it already. So then in Blood In, Blood Out, I had to re-experience all this, trying to fight to fit in. You know, but to be honest with you, I was embraced by the community more than any community that I'm a part of, you know. So for me, the Chicano experience has been a beautiful experience, and especially Blood In, Blood Out, because I had to, you know, I had to play off of what I've already gone through, which is, you know, my father, in the movie, my mother's Mexican, but in my real life, my father was Mexican. It was opposite, you know, and dealing with the racism from the other side of the family, and, you know, fighting and defending my father all the time. Because there was a lot more racism early on in the 50s and 60s. I don't think so. I think people push that more today, but I think there's more love between people that they want to love each other if they could be allowed. But I think back then it was real, you know, and I experienced it because on the white side of my family, they would say, "Oh, your dad's this and your dad," you know, they would make these horrible racial comments, and I started to stand up and fight for my father because I saw what he went through, and he told me, and this was part of Blood In, Blood Out for me, because, you know, the experience is me saying, "Hey, look, use me, use this," you know, when I tell a meadow in Blood In, Blood Out. So that experience was real for me. Well, I think one of my favorites, there's so many, it's such a long movie, it's 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Vatos Locos Forever.
Vatos Locos Forever is the main one. But one of the ones I like, there's so many. One of them, there's two of them, if I may. Right. The one where I say to El Mero Mero, Chicano is not a color. It's the way you think and the way you live. And I loved that because it was really who I was, you know. And then another one is when I walk in the prison yard with Magic. And, you know, all these things that I've been fighting to do as Miklo, to fit in with my community, to understand what being a Chicano is, and to be accepted. Finally, Miklo becomes accepted, not only in the community, but in La Onda. Yeah. And he looks at Magic and he says, when you expect nothing and you get everything, that's destiny. I like that one.
Or movies for your, you look more güero or not?
That's a good question because, you know, I found myself for years. Yeah. No, he's absolutely right.
But I need to know in his person that.
No, but he's right because, you know, what happened is they stereotyped me in that type of role for a long time. And then I would get called in as a, you know, Chicano or Latino gangster a lot after Blood In, Blood Out. And some of the directors would, when I walk in, they'd say, "You're not Mexican. What are you talking?" Because they didn't know any better. You know, we know as a community, everybody's got a güerito somewhere around, you know. But for them, they were like, "Wait a minute." And then I said, "Well, see Blood In, Blood Out, and you'll understand it." You know, but I finally broke that kind of thing, and they started to bring me in for all kinds of roles. You know, I get brought in now for a lot of Italian Americans because I do have a bit of heritage with Italy, long ago, which they went to Mexico and changed the name from Schiappa Pietra, which is Italian, to Chapa, which is a Latinized form of that. So I get called in for Irish roles now and all kinds of things. But I do think that Blood In, Blood Out overshadowed my whole career. And I think it's the movie that's transcended to where it is now, which is, to me, everywhere I go, people say, Blood In, Blood Out, Miklo, Miklo. It's more than a movie, I think, for me. And for people in the community, it's a Chicano experience. And I know a lot of people, you know, they look at the movie and you have different opinions because it's a very intense movie. It's not the kind of movie that's, you know, it's not a light movie at all. It shows the racism that happened in not only outside of the prison, but specifically inside of the prison. And I think it's a real movie. It shows the reality, and people don't look at it like a movie. It's a Chicano experience, you know? Like you had the Jimi Hendrix experience, well, this was the Chicano experience, you know?
Thank you.